a written production of the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated and is intended for the sole purpose of informing our Recreation Center members. Any duplication, copying, transmission, broadcast, or use, including electronic and social media, is strictly prohibited without the prior written consent from the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated. Thank you for watching.
You guys ready to go? Ready? Okay. I'd like to go ahead and get started with this. General Manager Cook, do you have any introductions? Or Mike? Perfect.
Madam President, yes, for this presentation, we have our architects from CCBG Architects of Phoenix. They're here. Scott Walker and Marty Ball will be making the presentation. Thank you. Thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you. Go ahead. The floor is yours. You just do your thing.
Can you all hear me okay?
A little
Closer?
There you go.
There we go. Okay. My name is Martin Ball. I'm with CCBG Architects, here with Scott Walker today. We've worked together for about 30 years, and we've had a chance to present this project to you previously. We wanted to give a little history for those who are new to the board, so that you've got sort of the same starting point. And then we brought a fly-through today that we can see in a more dynamic mode the current status of the project. So with that, I'll just run through the slideshow that you can see on your screens. A couple of intro slides about our firm and the kind of work that we have done over the years. We have designed anything from high-rises to private residences, and in terms of recreation centers, we've been involved in the recreation of the Bell Rec Center, pictured above and below, Sundial here, the pool area when it was reconstructed, Fairway Recreation Center. This little image here is from Venture Out in Mesa for their building. And then here at the left, Gamey Ranch Health Spa. Then just a bit about our starting point on the project. We had a program that was approved through the board, and we were directed to try to accommodate a new structure for Mountain View Rec that included a theater, a new pool complex, a basketball and volleyball gym, and a workout facility with a lobby. The initial design for this particular structure was to have been built at the south end of the existing Mountain View property. You can see here the length of the pool, looking at the main entry. We have an upper deck walking trail that overlooked the pool, and then the recreational pool or resort pool overlooking a lower area with a volleyball pool below. This is what it looked like in plan. We have 107th Avenue here to the left. North is up. And you can see here that this is the southwest corner of the existing parcel. That was the pool area. The theater backed up to the east parking lot on this particular site, with a little extension of the parking lot that takes the place of the existing storage buildings that are on site today. And it allowed us to bring goods in to the theater at a lower elevation so we could create a dock height for things being delivered to the theater. That would also allow us to make use of the parking that's on the east side of the site and parking on the west side of the site. Both entry points coming to the middle of the building where we've got to check IDs when folks come in the door. And then from that center lobby, you would enter locker rooms and gymnasium. Looking at the upper level, we had generated a walking track, which is similar to the ramp at Fairway Recreation Center. It allows you an inclined plane to both maneuver within the building, get from space to space, and also as a low-impact workout facility. So that would allow us to get up to the upper floor, where right in the middle, between the basketball and a view out over the mini golf area of the existing site, we would have the fitness equipment. It is very much like the scale and size of the Fairway Recreation Center workout space and locker room. Programmatically, it's very similar. One of the comments that came out of an early presentation was proximity of accessible parking to the point of entry to the building. So we worked to generate some graphics and illustrate maybe a little more closely how many accessible parking spaces we can get within close proximity to the entry point right here at the center of the building. We also had generated a drop-off area for folks who maybe needed to get just a little closer to the door and a second person could park the car. Looking overhead, this initial program, you can see here, can you all see my cursor okay? Yeah, great. You can see here, this is the size of the parcel that would be used for this new building. It allowed the existing mini golf to remain almost untouched. We would have to rebuild, I think, 2 holes of the mini golf course to make that work. We had to move the horseshoe pitch to the far north end of the site. We had the existing lawn bowling facility intact, and we have 2 tennis courts currently, and we have a pickleball facility. One of the key things on this site in sort of analyzing it and trying to figure out how to solve it is how do we make best use of parking that is split up on the west side of the site and the east side of the site. Knowing that today, as opposed to in the 60s when this was originally constructed, we do have some challenges for security, in particular in, I think, the southern part of Sun City. So one of the goals, in addition to the program that was approved for the individual structures, was to try to solve it in a way that made for a more secure facility where all of the activities could be documented. If we have lots of tennis players, we'd have a record of them coming to the site so that you would be in a better position to make an informed decision about what kinds of facilities needed to be added or maintained. Here you can see a 3-dimensional view of the existing facility. We've got tennis, pickleball, bowling, lawn bowling, I should say, and the mini golf, the existing auditorium, and then the existing fitness facility and pool. We started to look at the possibility after those early presentations. How would we conceive of using the site in maybe a little different way? In particular, how would we maintain the use of existing facilities, in this case, not shown in red, maintain the use of the auditorium, the pool, and the fitness facility on the site during the construction of a new facility. That way you're not losing out on the only resort-style pool that you have within Sun City. We also started to look at how would we better secure the site and how would we get parking generally closer to the entry point. There are some distances to walk if you have just a single point of entry into all the facilities, having the parking spread to east and west. Very convenient today if you simply walk into the pickleball courts, but if you've got to go through a front door and come back to the pickleball courts, that starts to be a lot of distance. So we offered an alternative to take a look at. In trying to maintain the existing facilities, we proposed the idea that we build the same program of basketball and volleyball, fitness, with locker rooms underneath, and a central lobby, plus the theater. Fitness, in this case, overlooks the pool, which was a strong point of feedback that we got early on, that we really wanted that to overlook the pool. How would we do that? Well, perhaps during phase one, we maintain the use of these existing facilities at the south end, and then we recreate the parking lot in order to get a bulk of parking for Mountain View Recreation Center, where the front door looked to Mountain View, the road, so that wayfinding might be a little more straightforward for folks who are just moving into the community, getting used to it. We do have some street parking along Mountain View. We anticipate that folks would make use of that as well as the parking that's on our site. We increased the number of accessible spaces and clustered them very closely around the front door, which is right here in the middle. We do have some of the existing east and west parking lot remaining, and we think it can work to our advantage, particularly when the 400-seat theater is in action. That's not each and every day, but when it is in action, you're going to have a lot more cars than you would normally have. So our goal was, while the primary entry is right here shown in kind of a peach color, that maybe there's a second way to get into the theater, and we allow that existing parking lot off to the east. We allow folks to come through a ticket checkpoint here at the parking lot and be able to access the site for those few times that you're running a movie or you're doing a play production or you've got a speaker. So that way, you've got a really short distance from all of this parking that might be more apt to be parked by theater goers. And it segregates the bulk of the parking for the rest of the facility, and maybe it doesn't get quite so overparked so that people don't have to park farther away than normal. So we felt like this had some advantages for us to explore, and we presented that to the board. I think the key points, here is just an image of this alternate proposal. We called it option 2. Key points were that it creates a central lobby that connects all the site amenities. This central lobby, as in the original proposal, would connect to the basketball, volleyball court, the locker rooms. It would maintain the ramp to get up to this upper level fitness, which overlooked the pool. It would have a direct view of the pool. It would have access down to the south end of the site as it developed, and we have access directly into the theater, which is on the far side of this particular image. The central lobby then can act as a central security point, except at those times when you bring in theater goers from the far parking lot. The fitness overlooks the pool and the gym. You view the length of the resort pool from the lobby, and we had proposed the idea of maybe a dive-in movie. So we still have that projection option that could be at the end of the pool, which is fun if grandkids come or if you want to have a social gathering. It's great to watch Jaws while you're in the pool. You'd provide the opportunity for dive-in movie viewings, and then you would have an inclined fitness circuit still to get up to the upper floor. So it really has all the same features, just reshuffled a little bit. Mm-hmm. In the next slide, we have an aerial view, really just indicating in particular the view down to the pool, both from the second floor and from the main lobby. We proposed to nestle the building in adjacent to and maintain the existing solar panel that's on site, which provides a really nice shaded entryway for those folks who are coming to the theater during maybe a summer production, so that you've got a nice outdoor space. We would, as in the original proposal, have accessible walkways in order to change elevation from the lobby elevation down to a lower sport pool. You can see here a ramp that would ramp back up and around, so that everything, including access into the pools, would have the ability to have a ramp into it, just like it does here at Sundial. Mm-hmm. You would have close access to the restrooms. There are theater restrooms specific to the theater, as well as there'll be access into the lobby and into the back side here to the lower level for the locker room area. The deep end of the pool is at the far end here, and then in the main body of the pool, we heard from those who do water aerobics that they'd rather not go lengthwise, shallow to deep, but maybe the short distance, so that when you're doing a class, people of all heights can take part in the class easily. So this gives you an idea of how that might be arranged on the site. And I think the key advantage that we were looking at is that you've got closer access to the front door for your accessible parking. You've got more of it than you currently do. You cluster the bulk of the parking as close as you can to that main entrance and reduce the overall average distance from parking space to front door. And it would allow you during the construction of the new facility to at least maintain the use of the fitness center, the changing rooms, and the resort pool. The positioning of the pool, if it is seen as part of Phase 1, which I think we probably would recommend, that does take the place of the auditorium. So I think the auditorium would probably be Phase 0.5. You start the building, then take out the auditorium as the building's getting close to finish and build the pool where the auditorium was, so that when you hit opening day, you've got all those facilities open and you can close down the old pool and then work on the south end of the site for whatever program the board sees fit. I do have a fly-through, which we haven't shown previously. This takes a lot of memory, but it's kind of fun. And it allows us to kind of get in and see where is the proposal now. We've had a little bit of time to articulate things and give a little closer view of what things might start to look like. So is everybody's monitors spinning? Okay, good. So you can see here in an aerial view, we have the theater at the left. We have accessible parking clustered right around the entry. We also have separate accessible parking over here for the theater goers. So all told, we're increasing the percentage of accessible parking on site. We have a primary entry wall that's glazed and looks to the north, so that folks have easy recognition of where you're supposed to be entering the building. Over here to the right, we have our gymnasium that's intended for basketball and volleyball. It has the inclined walking circuit that allows you to walk a length around the court and get up to the second level without having to use the elevator. The building, of course, does have an elevator on site in addition to the inclined walking track. Viewing through the trusses, you can see a little bit of the basketball stanchion and the court below. The low end of the ramp is here, closest to the lobby. Walking up and around, you land at the second floor of the lobby space. That's where you can enter the fitness area, from which you have a view down to the pool. Now just for illustration purposes, in this particular view, you can see this little L-shaped object. That is actually the back corner of the existing auditorium, so that you can kind of orient yourself as to where that building is relative to this proposed new pool. Scott and I, as we were starting to work through this, we came out to the site with our laser scanner, and we were able to get a very close scan of the exact position and elevation of the solar array on site, and it captured the back corner of the auditorium as well. So we're able to say, in addition to what the survey shows, very accurately exactly how this proposed building would nestle in between the solar array and the positioning of the existing facilities. So here at the pool, you can see we do have a fair amount of glass into the lobby space looking down the length of the pool. This is the resort style pool. We have deck chairs lined up all along one edge. It has a common spillway with the lower level lap pool. So both of those systems can work together. And the intent is that the disruption from swimming laps isn't problematic for those who are doing water aerobics or just casually swimming with grandkids. Over here at the side, we have a third pool within that complex, and that's a 2-court volleyball pool. Just for illustration purposes, we've got nets shown here. That pool also has a ramp to get down into it. And the entire circuit around the perimeter is ramped so that when you come out of the lower level locker room door, you have the ability to come down to the lower level or walk around to the resort pool. Looking over toward the theater, you can see here we currently propose a proper proscenium with fly space theater, a sloped floor with 400 seats. Those were the programmatic elements. The highest point on the theater is at 45 feet, which is like to the scale of Fairway Rec at that center portion of the site. One of the things we were really trying to do was to take the theater building and get it roughly in the middle of the site so that we didn't have that tallest point of the complex on any edge. We have neighbors all around. It's primarily residential, except for the golf course at the south. So we were trying to keep that tallest point inboard. You can see here from the parking lot view, we have existing solar panels, which we propose to remain in the parking lot. We have a loading bay door for a 30-foot box truck to back up to offload and onload. And then we would project that we'd have a position right here where we could have fencing and a gate for a ticket taker for folks to come in from the east parking lot. That would get folks who want to go to the theater kind of right in under the sunshade here, and I'm going to try to maneuver ourselves here. So that ghosted out here, as if it were glass, I've got the actual structure of the sunshade shown and the solar panels. So in this space, we would have the ability for folks to then enter directly into the theater through this door or into the lobby through these doors. All parts south on the site would be accessed from the lobby through these doors with a common pathway to the south end of the site. And this is going to get a little tricky, but I'm going to give it a shot here. We don't have all the finishes determined in here yet. So you're seeing the shell as though it's under construction. This is a side wing of the theater lobby, which would allow you to traverse in steps and in ramp to get down to the lowest level of the slope, close to the stage. Moving on into the theater, you can see that we currently project, we're seeing the sky through the building right now. I've got the roof turned off on a layer, but you can see there is a catwalk for lighting across the theater. We have a shaped and sloped ceiling, as most theaters do. And then we also have a balcony condition at the back, which is intended for the use of the theater players for lighting, follow spots, all that kind of good stuff. Down here on the floor, we haven't modeled the seats. It tends to get pretty dicey maneuvering this thing when you have all those shapes in there. So we haven't modeled the seats, so I will say imagine if you will on that one. But we have a sloped floor, which I believe you can see here, sloping down to a fairly wide level space at the base of the floor. The rationale behind that was that you could, instead of doing all fixed seats at your discretion, you could do a section of this with seats that are interlocking like we use in many of our church social halls, so that you had the ability to use this front of the lobby for or front of the theater for different kinds of things. You could bring in a band and have a smaller production that maybe worked with an opera singer on the stage, much like you would see in a large-scale theater where they might have actually a lift. This program didn't really call for quite that level of accommodation. So instead, we've provided a flat floor at the base, which would allow you to do much the same thing. Continuing to turn, you can see the fly space, here, and the proscenium for the stage. And again, we haven't articulated curtains or anything along those lines at this point, but square footage has been provided for depth of stage per program and for stage left, stage right. And then off to this side, we have access into a storage area and the loading bay doors that we saw from the exterior. Off to the opposite side, looking over here, we have a side door which would allow players or guest speakers to enter the stage elevation from the side in case they were to be brought up on stage, or you had a guest speaker who you wanted to come out in front of the curtain prior to the production. And then off behind this wall, which shows an idea of the shaping that one would typically create for sound, and also baffling for lighting that was fixed in place. Off behind that wall, we have all of the green room, ladies' changing rooms, gents' changing rooms, makeup, and costume storage. So I'm gonna make a radical move here and back up. Oop, there we go. And get ourselves outside of the building and take a little closer look at the entry sequence. So looking at the entry courtyard, we have, as you can see in the foreground, quite a number of accessible spaces which would cross directly to the entry. Let's see if I can change our sun angle here. There we go. That's a little cleaner. We have a shaded arcade off to the right-hand side, and the front door is right under that arcade. We felt that it was important maintaining the parking that's over on the west-hand side of the site. We felt it was important to have a shaded arcade from that farthest stretch of parking under the walking ramp all the way to the front door. You know, our heat in the summer, we all know it, and it can be tough to deal with. So we felt that was a good accommodation in a very simple structure in order to accommodate the inclined walking plane above and an outside walkway that's shaded below. That brings you to the front doors. Right here at the corner, we've kind of opened things up, and we do have a guest drop-off area at the parking lot so that you can drop somebody off and they can walk right in the front doors. One part of the program that we'll ask for some additional direction on from RCSC and the board is the question of whether we have a direct entry into the basketball facility for other kinds of uses. In, I think, the existing facility, I believe that there was some crossover use with the golf club for dinners, fundraising dinners, that kind of thing. So we've allowed the possibility there to have a secondary point of entry that could be outboard of the security of the interior workings of the building. So you could maintain that if you so chose. Looking here at the other side of the entry courtyard, we do have a position here where for those theater days, we could have a point of entry for the theater that is isolated from those who are going to work out or to swim. Inside the building, we have the ability to cordon off the entire theater from the inner workings of the fitness and the locker rooms, et cetera. So this would serve then as a ticket-taking position and a front door for the theater in case you know, your grandkids come or your neighbor from down the street who might not be a member and might not have access to all the facilities that you have here in the rest of the building. That way you can sell tickets to others for whatever production you might be doing. This room here at the corner, trailing off to the east, is ancillary rooms associated with the theater. You've got your green room, your changing rooms, et cetera. And there was one programmatic element that was requested for a double height space that is like to the scale of the footprint of the stage, so that early rehearsals might be able to be done there, and then a portable wall so it could also be divided into 2 meeting rooms. So we're trying to get dual function out of those. Mm-hmm. So that's this closest, tallest portion of the building. I'm going to zoom through the front walls here, and we'll get a little bit of a view from up in the air. We projected that we would have a front desk position floating within the lobby adjacent to the front doors, so that you came in, you were able to check your ID, and then you could proceed around the corner through this vestibule into the locker rooms and to the elevator. You would have a view of the pool, and you would have the ability to go up the stairs, or after you changed, you would have the ability, if I can fly over, to run through these 2 doors, which isolate the acoustic condition of the basketball court, hard court with basketballs bouncing, volleyballs bouncing. You want to isolate that from the lobby as best you can. To the base of the ramp, which I think I can maneuver us. There we go. You can see here the desk at the left, through the doors, the base of the inclined walking plane. And then when you get into the ramp, you've got seating positions along one side of the ramp as you go up the incline. And then looking over here to the right, you've got the basketball court and the ramp continuing on around. Down here at the lowest level, we don't have windows frequently behind the backdrop so that you can concentrate on what you're doing on the volleyball court or the basketball court, but we do have some clear story windows at the walking ramp. Looking back at the lobby, you can get a feel for the scale of the volume. This is similar to the size of the lobby at Fairway Rec, very similar. And then looking out the walls under the staircase, you get a nice view down the length of the pool. Now in this particular view, if you recall, I still have turned on the corner of the existing auditorium. That'll go away, of course. But just for illustration purposes, you can see this wall here and this little hut. That is what we would propose to give you the ability to set a camera, a projector here at the hut and do a dive-in movie on that wall. That's actually the north wall of the existing fitness building. So we would propose that that might be something that you could hang on to, use for service, maybe build in additional bathrooms as you continue to project what needs to happen at the south end of the site. And it would serve as a good dive-in movie wall. I'm going to turn us around so we can look back into the theater side. We've got at the left our entry desk, and then another portal here at the right. This is a position that you can use velvet ropes to control access across. Folks who are in the facility could pass through to the theater side if there's a ticket taker there, or you can come in from outside directly into the theater. What we're actually seeing to the right and to the left, concealed behind this masonry wall, that's ladies and gents restrooms that are tied and dedicated to the theater goers. We've got 400 people. You've got to get them through the restrooms in a short intermission. So we don't want to get dual use out of the main locker room restrooms in that case. And then passing through that portal, if I can drive our way through there. Let's see. Oops. down a little bit. There we go. So this is the back of the lobby at the back of seating for the theater house. We've come through that vestibule from the main lobby, ladies and gents restroom doorways here, with a nice tall window wall at the south and then also at the north. I'll spin around. Right here to our right, we're looking at a position for concessions to be sold. And then we've got a little view to the parking lot and the entry court. Spinning around to the north, we've got a position here where we can set a doorway and a ticket taker to come in directly from the parking lot. And last, as we spin around, you can see we've got a couple of arches into a side hallway, which would give you access into the studio rehearsal space / meeting rooms when you're getting dual use of those. So pretty straightforward arrangement of things. It was important as we were talking through how to organize things that we were able to isolate the theater when it was necessary from the main facilities that all members would have access to. And then, of course, there will be those times when you won't need to segregate that access for theater goers and ticket payers. And then the facility can remain open to all parts of the building. So we feel like we've been able to walk that fine line in creating a facility that works for everybody at all times, but then can be isolated for ticket payers. Mm-hmm. Are there any questions on the process of how we got to this place or the result that we're looking at today?
I have some questions. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I have some questions. So first off, the reason why you reoriented was so that people could continue to use the pool and to get parking closer? Or was there a problem with the size of the building or the size of the space?
There were actually several advantages in looking to move I'm sorry, I can't look right at you while I'm answering this.
That's okay.
There were several advantages that led us to propose to the board to consider the north end of the site. One was to create more parking closer to the front door and to be able to increase not only the standard parking space count, but also the accessible parking space count, and to get more of those parking spaces, particularly the accessible spaces, really close to the front door. So that was one advantage. I think one of the biggest advantages, in addition to being able to maintain the use of part of the site during the course of construction, maintaining the resort pool, was to be able to control access to the entire site. I'm sure that if you've been on the board and have attended these meetings for a while, you've heard about vandalism at various sites, not just this one. But the key challenge, I think, that we were seeing in the original location for the building was that we really needed to leave the entire site unfenced in order for all of the parking to be logically accessed with a short distance. Today, it's great. You can park your car, you can walk into the tennis courts, you can walk directly into the pickleball courts. One of the challenges is anybody can do that. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the responsibilities that we were hearing from RCSC and the board is that in order to manage all the facilities that are available to residents in Sun City, you need to be able to prioritize them, and therefore you need to know how many people actually use them. And that count is lost in the current configuration. It's also important to be able to ensure the safety of folks who are using the site, to know that it's harder for folks who don't belong there to get in. And so I think the key thing that we found utility in moving the building to the north end of the site is that you could have one point of control for the use of the site. So those things together, that led us to propose, I think it was in June, that we came to present the option of moving the building to the north end of the site.
Along those same lines, one of the later views showed the back where the delivery for the theater is, and you could look and I could see the pool there. What prevents anyone from walking into the pool there?
Yeah, if you will allow, right now I do not have every fence panel designed into the 3D model. We haven't conjectured what would happen at the south end of the site or exactly what that fence line might look like. In our work to date, we've been focused on solving the functional program for the building. And we have not yet engaged civil engineering, landscape architecture, or some of the other folks who will help us to flesh out that condition. So I apologize if that gives you the wrong impression, but no, there will be a security point at the edge of that parking lot.
Okay. So in the original, you had this very nice drive up to drop people off. And in the revised, you have a drop spot, I'll call it, and it's in the middle of your parking lot. So it's going to be difficult or a burden because no one's going to be able to go in or out of their parking space while someone is dropping off. And if people line up to drop off, you're sort of a prisoner of not being able to escape the parking lot.
That's a fair comment. Let me zoom into that spot. The original configuration of that was much more generous in terms of the land we had available. You can see here, as I maneuver ourselves, we do have the space to get the car out of the drive lanes in order to drop somebody off and get them really close. Oops, excuse me. There we go. So that we can see the front door there. This gets residents really close to the front door. If I can get ourselves over, maybe do that. And there we go. So yes, the car that is actively dropping someone off can get out of the traffic lane. Stacking of cars, that's a fair comment. And it's something that we can continue to respond to if it's an issue that you feel would be challenging. I was surprised, actually, after the presentation where we had initially shown the accessible parking for the building at the south end. I thought that the drive lane for the drop-off was a pretty good move, but we did hear quite a bit, I think, that day about the distance from the parking that caused to the front door. And it actually, unfortunately, wasn't very well received, I think. So we tried to skinny it down, if you will. It's a lot of asphalt for one function, I think, is what we heard. But we can certainly continue to explore the question of stacking of vehicles there.
Well, yeah, certainly that is a lot of asphalt and not very aesthetic. I would say that in the current view. The original view had a lot of asphalt as well, but it was far more aesthetically pleasing, I think. I'm pretty sure you haven't really been asked to draw Phase 3 at this point, but where is Phase 3 in this? Can you give me some idea of where it is?
Yeah, I'll zoom us out here so that we can see the overall site. And you can see here to the south of the existing turnaround at the east parking lot and to the south of the solar array, and then to the east and southeast of the pool, all of that space is available for future development as the board sees fit. To date, we have not been asked or haven't really been given a program of exactly what we think is the highest and best use of that land. We've kicked around thoughts early on of could it be mini golf? Could it be pickleball? Could it be tennis? Could it be this, that, or the other? But at this point, we just don't have a program specific to that south end of the site. We do have a large amount of space to work with down there, which would give the board a relief valve that maybe at the other sites you don't really have right now. Between parking lots and existing structures, it would allow you some flexibility to develop as you saw fit.
Okay. You said that, and I'm not really sure about the seating, but originally I understood the seating was to be pull-out seating. I think we've gone to fixed seating. You discussed a little bit of pull-out seating at the front of the theater. When we made the change from what was to what is there enough room in there for 400 seats?
There are 400 seats in the theater. They're a combination of fixed to the floor theater style seats, like when you go to a Harkins or an AMC theater, that sort of fixed to the floor seating, maybe not quite so tall. But at the front, where it's flat, the idea would be that you would use interlocking chairs, and the choice of chair is up to the theater consultant and you at this point. The idea being that it just gave you greater flexibility. But there are 400 seats, and it actually contains a higher than minimum level of accessible wheelchair positions. The nice thing about having that bit of flexibility at the lower end and also at the upper end before you start your floor sloping is that with chairs, if you have an event that draws more folks in wheelchairs or who might have a walker to store next to them, it gives you greater flexibility to accommodate those needs. If you're showing Jaws and it's grandkids coming to the movie, then maybe you don't have quite as high a percentage and you can pack a couple more chairs in. So that was the thought. Pull-out seating is not something, if you were referring to what we might think of as high school bleachers, that was not part of the program. However, the idea of flexible seating in the form of chairs that interlock and stay put, that was what the thought was for the very front of the room.
Along the same lines, talking about the theater, and maybe I didn't understand the view when you did it, the bathrooms for the theater, are people having to walk by those to get into the theater?
They are in the main lobby to the left and the right of the entrance from the main facility, the main entry to the facility. And then there's also an entrance at the north and the south end. The thought was to simply provide a central space for folks who are coming from house left, house right exits to get to the restrooms. So yes, they are in the middle at the back of house.
Okay, but you can enter without. Okay, the basketball courts, you talked about seating on a ramp, seating up the ramp.
They're on the inclined walking surface, yes. That's a maximum 1 to 20 slope, just like you would have in most church floors. We're trying to keep that from 1 to 12 because then you've got to have grab bars on both sides. The thought was to build in a shelf or a beam to sit on as you go up the ramp. As you will probably remember from Fairway, the length of the ramp to get up a full floor is greater than the maximum length you're allowed to build a ramp. Therefore, you've got to have intermediate level positions for folks to be able to take a rest in their walk. And the idea would be that at those intermediate spots, you've got the ability to have a seat and rest. Our thought had been to continue that visual language down the length of the inclined positions, which can serve well for folks who are both tall and short to have an appropriate height to sit down and rest as you go up the ramp. So that was the thought.
And how is the court kept flat, or is the court on a ramp as well?
No, the court is flat. So you enter the ramp at the corner, and then to the right-hand side of those entry doors that we went through, you have a level basketball court or a volleyball court. So only the ramp that runs around the perimeter is sloped.
Okay. I guess my last comment really probably doesn't have a lot to do with the design necessarily, but the original design, if I understood you correctly, everything that wasn't in the design remained as is. So for example, you did your design and the pickleball courts were still there, and you did your design and the mini golf was still there, and so forth and so on. In this version, in the new version, that's gone. So we are adding essentially, because we wanted what you discussed earlier, we're adding $13 million to this project by not doing the original project.
Yeah, I think there is a value decision for the board to make in terms of the long-term function of the site and the security of the site. And I think that that's why the decision to look to the north came along after the June meeting, in order to get the best use of the site for the most residents, and then during the course of construction to have the ability to maintain that existing resort pool at the south end. What we choose to do down the road at the south end of the site, I think, is up to the board to direct RCSC and RCSC to implement. I guess the question of exactly what goes there is something that will require a bit of discussion. And then comparing the cost of creating facilities there that maybe fill a gap that isn't currently answered, or augmenting a gap that maybe has become more popular over time as compared to what had been developed in the past. So I think part of that value decision also needs to be the maintenance and upkeep of existing facilities versus the idea of creating maybe a better implemented plan for such facilities down the road, whatever they might be.
Okay. Well, I'm sure as I play this over in my mind over the next few days, I'm sure I'll think of half a dozen more questions, but that's really all I have for right now.
Karen, go ahead. Karen?
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, so I have a question about our parking allowances right now and how close they align with what the actual requirements are. So I think with new builds, we say that Maricopa County says you need to have one parking space for every 200 square feet. Because what I'm thinking is when phase 3 is developed, all of that is going to require additional parking as well, because if you build a new tennis court, for every new tennis court, you have to have 3 parking spaces. So my question simply is, are we generously matching, or are we just barely matching? How much savings might we have in future parking for a phase 3 by virtue of being, for instance, are we well over what the requirement is for Maricopa County right now for parking spaces, or are we just matching that so that anything that would to be developed in phase 3 would require additional parking?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable question. Not knowing exactly what would be developed in phase 3, I'm not sure if I can properly answer the long-term question, but I think in the near term, what you see right now is a practical amount of parking. Maricopa County's ordinance, as with most jurisdictions, tend to be a little under the reality of parking. I know in downtown Phoenix, just as an example, there are places where you don't have to have any parking. But in order to build something, those people who lend you money to build it want to make sure that there is parking. So to say, are we minimally providing what Maricopa County requires us to do? No, we're well over that number. Maricopa County is shooting pretty low there in the reality of operating a 400-seat theater plus all of the fitness and pools. So how we navigate that then in order to determine what's the right amount of parking is to look at the studies that RCSC has done of existing facilities that are like to this condition and to see the amount of parking that has actually been used versus what exists on those sites and to be able to compare. So yes, we are code worthy in terms of the number of parking spaces, well over that. But when you figure in 400 seats for the theater, that's going to be a high number of parking spaces required for just that function that Maricopa County doesn't quite capture in their zoning ordinance.
Okay.
So we feel that we're appropriately parked at this point.
Which would mean, though, that additional facilities would require additional parking as well.
Could be, depending on what you choose to build. And if it were, for instance, all tennis courts, it's a very low utilization of bodies for the activity for the square foot. Whereas if you chose instead, perhaps there was the need to do a demonstration kitchen and beauty salon or something along those lines, you'll have a much higher density of people who need to come there who might be more inclined to drive individually. So we would have to look at the specific program in order to justify that. What might be smart as you consider your planning is how does the parking get used during the course of a day? You do have parking that's appropriate for the theater that's on the theater side of the lot. It might be wise to consider what kinds of things, as you fill needs, do not coincide with the use of the theater. So you can get the highest and best use out of the amount of asphalt and parking and lighting and trees that you've already constructed.
Okay, what I'm hearing you say is that the code is not that critical. It's more what we feel our parking needs are. So could you just give me some numbers and say what the current square footage and the current utilization of this plan, how many parking spaces are required by code and how many do we actually have?
I don't have that on the top of my head, I'm sorry. I think we can get you some feedback on that.
Okay.
And then we can probably provide you with the information that RCSC has provided to us in order to help gauge that. I would say by experience, yes, we are well above what Maricopa County minimally requires of us, but we're a rational number of parking spaces for the kinds of uses that you have.
Okay, I have another question unrelated to parking.
Sure.
And that simply is we're looking at a 400-seat theater, 38,000, 39,000 square feet. Is there another performing arts center in Arizona that would approximate this, that we could actually go to look at to see what that looks like?
I think there would probably be many options. I think most high school theaters are probably a little larger than that seating count.
Dysart, for instance, is the next closest one here, and it's 1,300. So
Yeah.
that's not advantageous for us. But I've looked around, and Peoria built a 250-seat theater that's 22,000 square feet. Sun City West has a 200-seat theater that's 10,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Sun City West is smaller than this. Peoria is larger than us, and we're talking about building something that's twice the size almost of either 2 to 3 times the size of what they're building. So I'm just curious about that.
Sure.
Why are we at this scope? And I realize that's not a decision that you made. That was a
Right.
decision that was given to you. But my question is, where can we go to actually look at something that's comparable?
I think there probably is a close approximation of one of the smaller rooms. It might be a black box theater as opposed to this particular more focused, not in the round size of theater. I think the second house at Tempe Center for the Arts is pretty close to that. The main house is much larger. But there, I'm not sure it's quite a perfect approximation because it's multiple houses in one facility. So from the standpoint of looking at parking, it's going to be kind of skewed view. Probably would
This is
need
separate
to.
from parking. I'm just curious about the structure itself. So this, you call it the
Tempe
black
Center
box?
for the Arts.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a black box theater, which means that it's a different style of interior theater, but the number of seats might be about the same. Tempe Center for the Arts second house is roughly, I think it's a smaller theater like this one, and we
But
could
you're
probably
suggesting
try
that
to
it
find
might
that.
share the green rooms and the
Oh, yeah.
storage rooms with the larger
Yeah.
theater, so that would make it
Yeah.
less comparable.
And most community theaters are a little smaller because they don't have the kind of population of players that you're drawing from. Sun City's quite a large population of people, and this is the only facility of its kind. The stage that you are on right now has some attributes that are similar, but it's not a proper fly space and proscenium theater that this program was pointed at. So I'm not sure that this facility, of course, has quite a large house behind us as well to see that, and many of the community theaters are quite small. So, Scott, do you know of anything along those lines? We can look for some options. The general contractor that we were chatting with about the project to do the initial concept of what this would come in at, they've done other theater complexes, so they might be able to give us a feel for whether that theater exists for you.
May I? Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Oh, thank you. Just looking at what you've got up on the screen
Oh,
right
yes.
now, if there were a need for additional parking, would there be any reason why we couldn't extend the parking along that north side?
Along the north side, we're actually pretty well hemmed in. Oh, okay. Let me
Well, I
back
was
up.
looking at,
On the east side?
oh, facing north, yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
So north is up in this view
Oh, no,
here.
okay.
So, yeah, you absolutely could extend the logic of this parking if you needed to.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In our first proposal, we did that, and it's a similar condition to what you see today.
Okay.
I think the challenge there is, once again, one of the things we were running into at the south end of the site is that if you fence off and create a secured perimeter so that you can count all the people who use the facilities, the farther south you go with that parking, the farther the walk is to get into the facility and then to come back down to whatever
Yeah.
aspect you might be using.
We might, because if it's going to be outdoor kinds of activities, let's say pickleball, we might have to have some kind of electronic
Yeah.
check-in to,
There are options
there are
available.
options for that, yeah, where we
Yeah.
could still secure the facility, but they wouldn't have to be so far away from a facility.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And I guess another question was, we had at one point seen, but I've never seen it in print, and I can't reconstruct it again, the possibility of a two-story pickleball building. Was it your company that actually provided that conceptual drawing, or?
We put together space associated with a typical pickleball court and stacked up the number that had been requested to see would it fit. Beyond that, there hasn't been a design associated with it, but certainly taking away the existing lawn bowling, tennis courts, and pickleball courts and putting the building there, there's certainly the ability to get pickleball courts or tennis or a new mini golf facility constructed on the site within the perimeter.
Okay, well, I've heard that said before, but I'm just, if we wanted to have 16 pickleball courts and we didn't do a building, you're talking about 70,000 square feet, 48 parking lots at 320 square feet is an additional 15,000 square feet, and you're up to 85,000 square feet already, and I've been told that there's 102,000 square feet there.
That's from memory, that's about right.
So I'm just saying that if that's, if 16 pickleball courts, and that's all we're talking about, just the pickleball courts, is going to be 70,000 square feet, 15,000 square feet for additional parking for that. You're at 85,000 square feet, and you have 102. Where is lawn bowling? Where is an ADA-compliant mini golf course? I mean, I'm very concerned because people look at this and say, it looks like we have this enormous space. And I don't believe that we should look at it like, oh, there's going to be no problem, with this.
Director McAdam?
Yeah.
I think, we're getting a little far afield, but I would like to just say, this is one of the big reasons why we want utilization and utilization as a percent of capacity so that we make educated decisions about where the need is, and we build to accommodate that. If we find that we don't have the numbers and we are over capacity in certain areas, like tennis, why would we put tennis courts in?
Well, I'm not talking about tennis.
I'm not talking about tennis either, but we can't focus this totally on pickleball.
Well,
there are many things that are there already. There is mini golf, and there is lawn bowling, and there is tennis, and there is pickleball. So we would make the best decisions based on facts, not maybes.
Like, what more facts do you need from pickleball to understand that we need a place that has 16 additional courts?
Well, this is not the time or place for that.
May I move on with another question
Yes,
about
please.
the design? And can you go back to what you had there before you put that? It was the pool with the volleyball.
Yep.
Pool. Okay,
And we'll zoom in here.
yes, please.
Yep.
What I'm actually
We'll
interested in
lift.
seeing is the volleyball.
Yep.
There we go.
Excellent, that's exactly what I want to see.
Okay.
And before I comment about that, I want to go back to something Director McAdams said about the 400-seat theater. And I don't know if you've done a comparison yourself, but for a 400-seat theater, 35,000 square feet seems a tad big. Just saying that, okay? But let's look at the water volleyball courts, which are side by side. And what I don't see, and what I do know is going to happen, is it's a very vigorous game. And volleyballs leave the pool often. And I don't see any kind of barriers at all here. I see seating, lovely seating, right where a bunch of volleyballs are going to end up. How are we going to resolve that? Because you have the nets side by side. And even if you put them head to head, it wouldn't matter. The balls are leaving the pool.
That's absolutely true. I think that the critical thing that we were attempting to do there was to take the volleyball pool and set it at a slightly lower level than all the spaces around it, so that you didn't have to chase the ball too far. Whether or not we articulate the sidewalk and planting spaces around the volleyball pool in a way that would prevent the balls from rolling too far afield, we could certainly talk about this. I think that it is important to state at this point that we're in a conceptual design mode and have not been released to move forward on the project into schematic design, design development, construction documents, where we do bring in consultants such as civil engineers, landscape architects, and have a little more time to work out all of the details, not only with our consultants, but also with our clients at RCSC. So I guess I say that only to point out that we're pretty early on in the project at this point. So we do have some space that we need to articulate still. Does that help answer the concern?
I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying it's happening.
Sure.
Okay. And
And we
there was
appreciate the feedback as well. It is important to hear those notes as we move forward in the thinking.
Now, I see these lines here also above the pool here. Is that a water feature? Is there a water feature here?
Is it these?
That's buoys.
Those are the swim lanes.
Those are buoys?
Oh,
in a
that's the
line?
lap pool. That's the lap
Yeah.
pool.
Is that what you were referring to?
Yes, I'm having a little difficulty seeing it.
Yep.
But is there somewhere in this design a waterfall? I know one was discussed at some point.
There is a spillover from the resort pool. I'm going to zoom in here so maybe we can catch a little bit of that feature. We are looking to allow this big resort pool to have a negative edge for a portion of its length so that the water spills over into a common return with the lap pool. And that's where the filter plumbing will capture the water and take it back through the filters and then eventually recirculate. So we were trying to create a little bit of a spillover. That creates a bit of white noise, which we were hoping for, that the more active vocations in the pool, it might help to mask for those who really want a relaxing resort-style experience while volleyball is going on and lap pool as well.
Yeah, I can assure you that the water volleyball players are also very loud.
So are the 3 pools at 3 different elevations or just 2 different elevations?
Just 2, lap
So the
pool
lap pool and the volleyball pool
yeah.
are the same elevation?
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. A very good presentation, very nice rendition. And thank you, Bill and staff, for bringing it forward so that we can understand at least what the concept is. A couple of questions.
Sure.
First question, the square footages of the functions have not changed from the June of last year's?
No.
So those are all the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We haven't moved forward from those.
Okay. And the other thing is that's important, I think that we need to realize that this is a rendition of the project, not anything that's any more definitive in scope as of other than a rendition. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep. We're at concept design at this point.
I understand.
Yep.
When it comes to the next step, then might have some comments. But at this point in time, wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Director Collins.
Thank you. Just a couple. You said the fixed seating, there is 450 of them, or is that including the locking chairs?
There are 400 seats in the program, and that will include interlocking chairs at the level area at the lower edge.
So how many of them are the actual comfort seating?
I will have to actually go through and do that count. It's been a little while since we last presented, and we have not had direction to move forward, so I will have to go back and count that for you.
We can do that later. Kat hit on a couple of the things, like we have a place where we play volleyball now, and no one is allowed in there unless you're playing, when they're playing. So that was a good question, because we already have an area where we have to close everything to everyone else unless they're playing volleyball. So we kind of touched on that. The other thing I have is, you mentioned the bathrooms in the theater, for the theater. How many, like your occupancy in those bathrooms, how many, like in this one here, we have 20.
Sure. Let me put my glasses on. I'll go over
And that
to the other.
doesn't count the stage.
Yeah, the players have their own facilities back of house, just as this building does in the back there. So zooming in here, we can see per the code, we are not required to have 5 ladies stalls and 2 plus 3 for the men. We're not required to have quite that count, but the theater in particular is a little bit unique because short intermission, you need to push people through there pretty quickly. So we've augmented just a little bit above the requirement that we might have. Usually the way the calculation goes when you're looking at it is you are required to divide by 2 the total number of occupants, in this case 400. So 200 men, 200 women. And then for the different kinds of uses, the code has different load factors. So in this case, I think if we were to go strictly by code, we'd probably have 2 fixtures ladies, 2 fixtures men. Might even come out as 1 for the gents. but because you're trying to push people through there very quickly in order to get back to the theater for the second act, we've upped those pretty generously in this case. So we'd have to actually do the calculation to give you the exact numbers, but just going from memory, I think it's maybe 1 to 70 for the ladies, so it might be 3 fixtures we'd be required. We've provided 5.
Right, because here tonight, as a matter of fact, we will have 400 to 450 people in here, and we have 20 right now. And we barely make it through with that. That's why I asked the question. Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? I just want to thank you so much for coming and doing this for us. It was one of the board members who asked to see this, but I think it was really helpful for members and for people who are new to be able to see this. And I also thought it was a great presentation, and I love seeing all the ADA compliance that you've built into this. Very nice.
Well, we really enjoy working with RCSC and Sun City, so we're looking forward to the opportunity to see this one move forward at some point. So
Okay.
we stand ready to serve.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're adjourned.
This is a copyrighted production of the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated and is intended for the sole purpose of informing our Recreation Center members. Any duplication, copying, transmission, broadcast, or use, including electronic and social media, is strictly prohibited without the prior written consent from the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated. Thank you for watching.